Welcome to CPAC Now, America Uncanceled. I'm Mercedes Schlapp, and joining me today is a very dear friend, someone who I worked very closely with during the Trump campaign, Tim Murtaugh, who is the author.
An author now.
Of this book, Swing Hard in Case You Hit It. I was going to say miss it, but it's in case you
don't
hit
miss
it.
it. Yes,
swing hard in case you hit it. And co-host of Line Drive podcast, Tim, thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me, Mercy. It's good to see you. We worked very closely for a long time in the White House, when you were in the White House and I was on the campaign in the administration, and then on the Trump campaign 2020.
Right.
It was
I think
fantastic.
I shed some tears in Tim Murtaugh's office.
It wasn't my fault.
Yeah, no, it was definitely not Tim's fault.
It was commiserating.
So, I see this article in Fox News about your book, and I automatically wanted to get you on air. I think
Thank you.
It's so important to talk about this redemption story, to talk about why you ended up writing this book.
Well, I had a really bad alcohol problem for a long time, and
how old were you?
When I started in high school, and then I was in my late 40s, I guess, or mid 40s when I quit. 8.5 years ago, in May of 2015, I took my last drink. That's well before I worked in the Trump administration, well before the Trump campaign. And I wrote the book for a couple of reasons. When I went to rehab a number of times, 5 times in fact. And when I was in there, I would go to the bookstore all the time, and I didn't want the clinical books, and the spiritual ones were nice and they help a little bit, but I preferred reading the books that were about the individual stories of people who had been through alcoholism and recovered.
Right.
Those are the ones that I gravitated to. And so when my wife was talking about it with me one time a few years ago, and she said, you ought to write that. And it occurred to me, you know what? I love those stories about people's lives and how they managed to beat it. And that's what this is. That's what I wrote. And it also was in response to the opposition research types who are, we're familiar with them. And in politics, they dig into your background and then they try to feed that stuff to reporters to get them to write bad stories about you.
Yeah.
They were shopping around because I have an arrest record as a result of my drinking, 2 DUIs and some other things. They were shopping that around, trying to get reporters to write stories about it in an effort to hurt President Trump and hurt his campaign. We were lucky enough to be able to prevent those stories from being written at the time. But I thought if I write this book and tell my stories myself and tell on myself, then it loses all of its power.
Right.
And the political opponents and the haters, they will never have anything on me like that again if I tell it in my own way, in my own terms. And that's what I did. And I hope that at least it will reach somebody. And if it helps one alcoholic not drink, that'll be great.
Right. Well, in the book, it says here, from waking up in jail to flying on Air Force One less than 4 years later, this is your journey from desperate alcoholism to the top of the political world on the 2020 Trump campaign. When was that moment when you're like, I need to have to turn my life around and really save yourself?
Well, as I said, I'd been to rehab a number of times, 5 times, 4 times inpatient, 1 time outpatient, and nothing really stuck. But
why?
Well, it just even those days when I wasn't ready, or I hadn't done the work, or a lot of times I was convinced that it was too hard, that I was not going to be able to do it, not going to be able to quit. And what happened was I was on probation for my second DUI. I had served 10 days in jail. My sentence was 90 days. I served 10 of it, and 80 of it was suspended, and I was on probation for 3 years. And if I kept my nose clean for 3 years, that 80 days would just go away. Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't keep my nose clean. I got arrested. I think it was a drunken public intoxication charge. And if I had gotten convicted of that, I would have had to have served the rest of those 80 days. I would have to serve 80 days. And that would have ruined my career. At the time, I was working for a member of Congress. I would have lost my job and my career. I would have lost my wife. My friends and family were about fed up with me. If I had gotten convicted of that, everything would have been over. My life, professionally and personally, would have effectively been over. I had a good lawyer, and he gave me some great advice. I went and did some community service, many hours of that. I had the ignition interlock system put on my car voluntarily. I went to an outpatient rehab clinic, and I went to a ton of AA meetings and got people to sign and attest that I had been there. And we went and presented that to the prosecutor, and he said, okay, I'll tell you what, we're not going to move forward on this, but if I even hear your name in the future, you're in big trouble. And so I did not get convicted of that. I did not have to serve the rest of the remaining 80 days, and I haven't had a drink since.
How did faith play a role in this as well?
You cannot really get through it, I think, without. In AA, they teach you it's not a religious program, and they don't talk about specific religions or gods. They talk about a higher power, and you can assign anything that you want to be your higher power. People say, oh my gosh, this coffee cup in theory could be your higher power.
I hope
don't
that's
know
not the case. That you
I don't know how that would work, but no.
Although people do love coffee, but
I'll tell you one thing that really worked for me is the serenity prayer. And anytime I was feeling stressed or like I thought maybe I was in danger of taking a drink, the serenity prayer takes about 15 seconds to say it. And it sort of calmed my mind, and it reordered things, and it helped me get through that one moment to be able to get through an hour or half of a day or an entire day.
Why the title, Swing Hard in Case You Hit It? I think it might have to do with your grandfather, but
close. Yes. So I come from a baseball family, as you
Yes.
know. My grandfather was Danny Murtaugh. He was the manager of the Pittsburgh Pirates for a long time, years ago, and won the World Series twice. And my father played baseball as well in the minor leagues. And when I would leave the house to go to baseball practice every day, my dad would say to me, swing hard in case you hit it. Right, just sort of in a joking way, But I took that, and I think it's actually a pretty good philosophy for life.
Yeah.
Swing hard in case you hit it. If there's something worth doing, take a big hack at it. If you make contact, it's better that you swung hard, right?
Well, you talk about in the book, there's what you call the sober chapter, and then when you were under the influence chapter. Walk us through when you make this transition into, you actually swung hard, and before you know it, you were running the communications department over in the Trump-Pence campaign.
Well, I had worked in politics for a long time in a lot of in Virginia and in different races in other states, and at the state Republican Party in Virginia, at the RNC, at the Republican Governors Association, lots of years in politics and communications. And I was working for a member of Congress from Pennsylvania, Lou Barletta, who's really a good guy, good man. And the wheels were just coming off. My drinking had gone for decades, gradually worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And it was in 2015 where I woke up in jail, and I knew I was facing 80 more days, and that's the day that I had my last drink. And then it's just about, I learned early on in recovery that I anyway, always should talk about yourself and not what other people should do. My experience was that I learned not to make promises. You don't promise, oh, I'm not going to drink again, oh, I'm going to behave better. You show them by doing it, by living it, and it takes time. So I stayed in that same office with Congressman Barletta, and then when Donald Trump got elected president, it was the day before the inauguration, and I saw that the news was that Sonny Perdue, former governor of Georgia, had been named agriculture secretary. And I didn't know Governor Perdue, former governor of Georgia, but I knew a lot of people who worked for him. So I sent a text to Nick Ayers, who a lot of people in Washington know, and I said, he was a Sonny Perdue guy from way back. And I said, I sure would love to work for Governor Perdue. And next thing you know, I'm at USDA with Secretary Perdue, and from there to the Trump campaign.
Which we got to work together.
Yes, and that's when I first met you. Of course, I had known the legend of Mercedes Schlapp.
You quickly became a legend because it was a tough job. The USDA job was tough, but then you enter into the Trump campaign, and that was a whole different monster.
Well, that's being comms director on the re-election campaign for the president of the United States. First of all, it's the highest honor of my professional career. I don't see how that could ever even be topped. But that is a job, you have to be called to do it.
That is right.
It's 24 hours is not enough hours in every day, and 7 days are not enough in each week, and 30 days in each month, and whatever else. It was so all-consuming. But for, I think, a guy who was a great president, we fought really hard for his reelection. It was a weird year. I tell a lot of the stories in the book. COVID, election day, how the election really seemed like it never ended.
Yes.
To January 6th and beyond. It's all in there. I cover all that stuff.
So let me ask you, when people read this book, what's going to be the most shocking thing they'll learn?
I think some of the stories that I tell about my life before I quit drinking, I think are, like a lot of people say, if I say, yeah, I used to have a drinking problem, I'm not sure that they quite understand that. 2 DUI arrests, a handful, I can't even count them up, of drunk in public or alcohol-related, more minor offenses.
Yeah.
Just, how out of control it really was. And the fact that I was able to get it back together, and I'm still only one drink away from spiraling again like that.
Yeah.
Every alcoholic is. I think for people who don't know anything about the disease, I think it's shocking how far you can let your life go.
So what made you start drinking?
Oh, it was just a high school
social
thing. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
when my buddies in high school. One guy was bigger and looked older than the rest of us, and he would be able to get people to sell him a case of beer at the local beer
Yeah.
distributor, and so that's how we started. I guess maybe I was a sophomore or junior in high school, maybe.
And what impact has it had on your family?
Well, it was really bad for a while,
Yeah.
really bad for a while, and but I think it has been. My wife still, I think she has some PTSD from some of the stuff that she witnessed, and she saw me at my absolute worst. And I guess I credit her with it, but she might think, gosh, I was so crazy to stick around. Why would you stay with somebody who kept acting like that? But I think the thing that I take the most pride in, aside from just getting sober and continuing on and being able to have a successful career and be able to write a book about it and survive it all, is that I have two little boys, my sons, who are ages 5 and 7, and they have never seen their father take a drink or be intoxicated. And, I hope they never do.
So lessons learned when someone finishes reading this book, what do you want them to take away from the book?
I would like for them to take away that anything is possible, that it doesn't matter how bad it might seem. I was in a pretty bad situation. I woke up in the drunk tank in Fairfax County with the prospect of going to jail for 3 months and losing everything.
Yeah.
And I had to figure out a way to dig myself out of that and try to get back on the path. And I think the takeaway from this is that it doesn't matter how bad it gets, it's possible to get out of it.
I remember we were together during the COVID pandemic.
Yes.
Really, we built out studios from my house.
Yes, in your house. Yeah.
And we would have Studio A and Studio B, and it was literally like 2 laptop computers.
There was an office in the living room, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Well, we would tell the children to please be quiet. But with the COVID pandemic, and obviously there's so much of this kind of darkness and sadness in the world right now. And I think you've seen so many more people having horrible mental health issues, turning to drugs and alcohol. What role, I would say, do communities, does the government have in helping people with addiction?
Well, I'm sure that the government can help in funding this or that. But for me, just a local Alcoholics Anonymous meeting that I found was extremely helpful.
Yeah.
And it's just little skills, little tips that you pick up. For me, it was stopping and saying the Serenity Prayer when I felt like I was under pressure or under stress. There are communities like that, AA communities everywhere, in every community in this. Once I went on vacation to Ireland, in Ireland of all places, and I found an AA meeting. This was very early on. I haven't been to one in some time. I probably should get back. But that is one thing to rely on. I read a lot of books about the problem, about people who went through the problem and came out the other side and recovered. And that's what I did. I thought, that got me through a lot of dark times while I was in rehab, feeling very alone, feeling really up against it. Like, how am I ever going to get out of this? And then once you get back to the real world, am I going to be able to do it? And so, this book it's not a guide, it's not a how-to, but this is my story, this is how I came through it. Maybe it helps you.
I know Brad Parscale was campaign manager at the time. Mm-hmm. How did you talk to him about, look, I've got an arrest record, obviously being transparent was important. How did that go?
Yeah. Well, it went very well. I was impressed. I was afraid it was going to be a big hurdle for me. I had told Secretary Perdue when I went to work at USDA prior to my hiring, mm-hmm. I said, listen, you should know this. And he said, well, are you drinking today? Are you drinking now? Are you currently drinking? And I said, no. And he goes, well, okay then. So that proceeded. And then I knew that all this stuff was out there. I had a police record. I knew it was available to find. So it's only right and proper that I would warn them. Going to work for the President of the United States,
right.
Re-election campaign, it's a pretty big project.
Yeah.
It's an important thing. So I told Brad, listen, I got to be straight with you. I've got a couple of DUIs. There are some other things on my record. The opposition, they're going to be able to find this if they want, and it could hurt the president. I bet they will try to use it to hurt the president. Mm-hmm. And he told me that he ran it past the president. Now the president believes in redemption stories.
I love it.
The president's brother is well known to have had a problem, and the president himself says he has never had a drink of any kind, ever, not one time in his life.
Yeah.
So Brad told me that the president got it and understood, and he likes redemption. He likes comeback stories.
He does love the comeback story, which we definitely want to talk about the comeback story. But where can people pre-order the book?
Pre-order it right now on Amazon.com or other real retailers, but Amazon is the easiest. You can search for my name, Tim Murtaugh, and it will come up, or you can search for the title. It's pretty easy to remember. Swing Hard in Case You Hit It.
Just don't miss it.
Yeah, and it went up the other day. I first started announcing that this was coming out over the weekend, and for a little bit of time, it made it up to number 11
Good.
on the elections list. Amazon has a ton of
Yes,
lists.
they do.
And it was on the elections list, made it up to number 11.
It's a great Christmas gift, and especially for any of your relatives that might be really struggling right now with alcoholism. Just an inspirational book. So Swing Hard in Case You Hit It. Tim Murtaugh, thank you so much for joining me.
Mercy, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
And thank you all for watching. And of course, you know where to catch us on podcast as well as cpac.org. God bless.